Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, comrades and friends, today we're going to be reacting to Kids Who Roam the Halls. Is it just my school? This is a series where I review various different educational posts, topics, news articles, and the like, current events, and just give my reaction, give my 2 cents, my infinite wisdom, as they like to say. Every YouTube guru will say that. Not that I'm a self-proclaimed YouTube guru, but that's what people will say. And so let's get right on into it here. Who am I? My name is Ian Phillips. I'm a history teacher at the middle school level, and I'm also a doctoral candidate researching teachers' perceptions of various behavior management strategies at the American College of Education. So pretty cool stuff here. And before we react to it, we got to read it out. We got to read out the post, right? So here we go. Kids who roam the halls. Is it just my school? Quote, so I'm a first-year teacher at a middle school in a big city. We have a lot of issues with chronic tardies and absences. I remember students skipping school when I was in school, but the kids at the school I teach at are doing it in a different way. The kids at the school I work at literally roam around the halls, trying to avoid administration for the whole day. Literally, some kids are present at school, but absent from every class. I need to know, is this happening at your school too, or just mine? That's a very valid question. I like to think so. And we'll start off with this, right? One of the things that really stirs my berries, just grinds my gears, slides the cheese off of my cracker, and I hate it the absolute most, is when people try to blame the teacher for kids skipping class, right? They're like, oh, if your lessons were more engaging, the kids would want to stay in class. The kids would want to be there. And it's like, I don't know about that. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. I'll tell you that. Because the reason they're skipping class is because there's no consequences for skipping class. That's the reason they're out of class. And so I would not blame the teacher for this in 99% of cases. I do not think this is a teacher issue. This is an administration problem. And even if the teacher was having problems with this, at the end of the day, if the kids are still leaving for just one teacher or something, it still doesn't matter because the administration should be taken seriously, right? If there's, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter why they're skipping, right? You can't just skip work and expect to have a job, right? And so then, this gets to the problem where it's like, all right, the kids go to the workforce and they're wholly unprepared, and people try to, blame the education system. And it's like, well, yeah, you probably can blame the education system. Is that necessarily teachers? I don't think so. But can you blame the education system? Certainly, yeah, because we're not preparing these kids to function at a job. It's just like when people say, oh, well, like the job will make all these accommodations and they'll allow you to be late and this every single day. It's like, yada, yada, yada. It's like, no, they won't. It's like, and you're going to learn that when you get fired from your first couple jobs until you can actually realize, like, oh, wait, I can't be late every day, and hopefully you catch on before then. But it's like, it's a different world, right? And people aren't going to tolerate that because they're paying you money, and they want to see results for that money, right? It's like, you think of somebody starting a business and they're putting up $1 million or $100,000 or however much money they're putting up, just risking their entire life savings or getting some loan or potentially going bankrupt over this, that they're just going to allow you to not show up when you need to for work and just jeopardize their entire business. It's like, no, they just go hire somebody else for the same amount of money that they're paying and get the job done, right? It's like, so why should they hire you? It's like you have to offer them something, and it's like maybe you're not coming in there like Stephen Hawking with like just being able to fix every issue in the world, right? Because you're just that smart, right? But as long as you can show up on time, get what you need done, and show up with an okay attitude, it's like you're gonna be fine, And so I think one of the big things is just literally just showing up. I mean, how much of an issue this is, especially with a lot of people. Like, I know some people who work in different industries and they're managers, and they can't get people to show up for nothing, right? It's very, very difficult. But eventually the older generation, they start to learn. Oh yeah, I gotta show up. Or maybe that's just how they were brought up to begin with, because it wasn't a thing. Maybe it was somewhere, but to me, all the older generation I talk to, teachers and the like, this wasn't a problem, 15, 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. This is an issue today, and I don't really understand why this is the case. And I'm sure it depends on the demographic that you're teaching, where you're teaching at, how socialized the students are, what grades they're in. It's like, but at the end of the day, I don't really see this as being a teacher issue more than I see it being an administration issue. So that's the first thing that we'll get off of our plate. But what can you do to try to make this issue better yourself? The first thing I would do is consult district policy and consult your union and as well as your administration about potentially doing hall passes in the following manner. First, I would make the hall passes nice and visible, so that way everybody in the school is on the same page, right? We all adopt the same hall pass, and that could just be like a big neon sign. That's what I have, a big neon sign. Right? That's what my students carry around, right? It's a big tray, neon stuff posted all around with duct tape, right? Huge tray. like a foot and a half by like a foot, right? Big, right? You're not going to miss it, right? And the reason for that is because we want to know whether or not you're skipping class. And it's like, and it's a nice sturdy hall pass too, so it's not going anywhere, because that's an issue as well. Like, kids will destroy the hall passes. And so you got these big hall passes here, and you say to yourself, all right, well, what do I do with this big hall pass now? It's like, okay, well, if you ever see anybody in the hallway for any reason at all without one of these big hall passes, then you know they're skipping class and they need to get some form of consequence, right? Because it's unacceptable, right? And you have to be equitable about this in the sense that everybody has to be treated the same way, right? You can't just say, oh, I like this one, we'll let them skip today. It's like, no. Anybody skipping class for any reason at all, there's got to be a consequence for that, right? Now, obviously, there might be some exceptions because some of you guys are probably thinking, okay, what about if they got to go to the nurse or something, or they got to make an emergency phone call? It's like, fine, you can make separate passes for those. But at the end of the day, if they're outside of the hall with like some type of designated pass, that's a major issue, and it should not be happening. And then also too, especially depending on the grade, probably more so once you get to middle school and high school, maybe less for like K through 3, maybe K through 6 even, maybe K through 5, I don't know. But certainly middle school and high school though, you should maybe limit the number of passes that students have per day, and or even per quarter for that matter. I remember when I was in high school, we used to have a little planner that we would carry around, and it was like 2 pages full of just blank passes, and you can use them however you want. But when you ran out, and so like that was, and like you didn't lose it, right? Because you weren't leaving without the hall pass, right? Like it was a big no-no. You'd get detention or something, right? And so like, look, why is it not like that today? I for the life of me, I can't understand why. And even if you didn't do that, even if you just tracked it daily with teachers, you pass around a little chart or something, like 2 passes a day. Like we were doing that at my school for a while, and it was okay. But it's got to be enforced more. It's got to be like, this is law, man. Like you're not leaving if once you used all these passes. And personally, for me, I remember when I was in the charter world, my first 2 years of teaching, we used to limit passes to about, I think it was like 15 every single quarter, and it literally was not an issue going to the restroom. Like or people just leaving class in general, skipping or whatever. Like it was not a problem ever. Like I can think of like 1 or 2 instances where kids would just leave class for very, very long periods of time, and eventually you're gonna have to do the following. You say, okay, fine. Want to skip class? It's like, well, then you're never going to get a pass ever again from the teacher. It's like if the teacher wants to, if you ask the teacher to leave, it's like the teacher will call administration or just the office, right? And they'll say, look, we need to escort for the student to go wherever they need to go, and done. Boom, problem solved, man. And so then the escort will come, and they're not going to want that, right? So eventually they'll shape up, and then you just remove the escort like a month later, because then they'll get in line, right? Because it's just the way that it has to be, and it sucks that it has to be like that, but that's probably the best route forward in my opinion. And it takes a lot of effort on behalf of all the stakeholders in the school. We all sort of have to coalesce. Is that the right word? Coalesce? I hope. We all have to come together and be a team on this, right? Otherwise it's just simply not going to work. It has to be standardized in some regard. And again, maybe it's a little bit different at the younger grades. Maybe there's some wiggle room there, but for anything like middle school, high school, certainly have to come together on that. But yeah, limit the number of passes, and I wouldn't be afraid really of the legal ramifications of that, right? Because some people will say, all right, yeah, but you can't just deny somebody to the pass to go to the restroom, blah 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 blah. It's like the law is not really clear about that. It tends to be a state issue and a district issue, so it really depends on where you're at, and most of the time it's a district issue. And so yeah, you actually can, and within reason, of course, right? Like if somebody's like, look, like they never ask all the time, like it's an absolute emergency, blah 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 blah. Like yeah, of course, like just send them out, right? But if it's just like a normal everyday situation, it's like, look, dude, you're not leaving. And I know some people will mention, okay, well, what if it's like a medical issue or something? It's like, well, yeah, then certainly, yeah, okay, go ahead. And we'll probably have documentation for that too. Or maybe they're even on like a 504 plan or something, totally different. But for the average person, I think that they'll do fine with it, especially in places too where there's the transition. You got 4 minutes in between classes or something. It's like, go then, right? And if you can't, it's like, well, you still got all these other passes for at least your core classes at the very least, and maybe you make that 20 or 25 passes a quarter. I don't know how much you make it, but at the end of the day, they got to be responsible for that, and it's got to last them. It's like you go in the morning, you got homeroom, lunch, you have maybe any study halls. It's like the opportunities are endless, right? And so you just have to take this horrible issue that we've been dealt with and just sort of just do these remediations in the best manner that you can. And but again, I'd consult with the union because they're going to know best. They're going to know your policy is the best for the district. Maybe get involved with them if you don't like their policies and try to change them. But that's really the route that you have, in my opinion. That's probably the best course forward. I would say consequences. Probably try to do like an in-school suspension type thing. So like if they're missing, and that could be like a detention where they just go to in-school suspension for like a period or something, maybe even after school, if you have that is, or even for the whole day if it becomes a chronic issue all the time, right? And it can't be fun, right, to go to in-school suspension, because it has to be worse than staying in class, because the whole goal is to keep them in class, right? And so like if they go to in-school suspension, it's fun. They're playing games on their computers, they're on their phones, they're talking. It's like, that's not going to fly. I mean, you just can't do it, right? And that needs to be shut down right away. And if it's not shut down, then you have to do some like out-of-school suspension or something. I mean, I don't know. I'm not even a big fan of out-of-school suspension. Personally, I wouldn't even endorse that. Never mind, I take that back. But what I would endorse would be in-school suspensions, and like that, I think that's good. And even if you had to do different classes for it, or even talk about maybe a different environment for the student, right? Is there a reason that they're skipping every single day? Is it a medical issue that needs to have some accommodations? Is it like a class issue, like a behavioral issue, to where they literally just need to be in a different class to fit their needs, and that's why they're leaving all the time, because they just can't handle the other classroom? There's lots of routes that you could go with this. But at the end of the day, I do think that this is an issue that can be solved. It's oftentimes it's a policy issue as opposed to the teacher issue, right? So like, make your lessons as engaging as you possibly can. Try to collaborate with the other stakeholders in your district, in your school. Try to just do all that you can. Maybe contact parents, why not ask them what the deal is with that. But you really can't do much outside of that. It really comes down to the administration. So I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, especially as a first-year teacher in a big city. You're going to be dealing with chronic tardies and absences all the time. Like in my district, I think it's about 60% of students are absent all the time, or like chronically absent. That's a big chunk of students, and people don't really realize that. That's 10% of the school year that you're missing out on. And when you're even absent in class more often than that, it's just a whole other issue. So just do what you're doing. Bring up some of these points that I've talked about. Try to standardize the hall pass system as best you can, and talk about the restrictions, because sometimes they need more structure. Structure's not always a bad thing. I remember one year I was teaching, and I tried to be very peppy and exuberant and just woo, rah, 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 just trying to make it like a fun learning environment for the middle schoolers that I teach, and they were like, look, man, we need more structure. And they just flat out told me, they're like, look, you're too unstrict. And I was like, what on earth does that even mean? So sometimes the kids, they need that, right? And they'll tell you. I mean, just got to ask them, say, like, look, what would be a fair policy that we could implement and try to come to a reasonable solution about you skipping, right? Just have a conference with the student. And really, that should probably be like the first step to begin with, right? You should have a conference with the student, talk to them about the skipping, with the administration and you, maybe other teachers as well. Get them in class, and look, if it still becomes an issue, then go to detention. Still becomes an issue, then you're going to go in-school suspension. And I think you just keep them there indefinitely, because I mean, I'm not a really big fan of out-of-school suspensions or expulsions sometimes, but out-of-school suspensions, I usually think that you can avoid those as best you can. And, but then it becomes a funding issue, so you can expand on, well, do we have the funding? What if we got two kids who really despise each other in the same in-school suspension room? It's like, fair game, right? Maybe there's a place for out-of-school suspensions, I'm sure. I have no doubt, right? But in most cases, like if you're just skipping class, it's like, it's probably the place that you need to be. And eventually they'll learn, like, the incentive is that you get to stay in class instead of being there. And it's going to be a lot more fun, because, in most cases, like if you're a teacher on Reddit, for example, right? And you're actually asking about these to improve your students' lives and whatnot, and you're asking for this support outside of work hours, like, you're doing great as it is. I mean, you don't really gotta be worrying. Especially like in a few years from now, you're gonna be such an expert, you won't even recognize yourself now, right? So don't be too hard on yourself. I think it'll all work out. So that's my 2 cents. A little bit of a rant there. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, comment. I'll be forever thankful. At Ian Phillips USA on all social media. And you have a great rest of your day, everybody. Peace.